The fastest way I ever blew a great trade was by adding for comfort. The smartest money I've ever made was by adding only when the market paid for my courage. When I think about the trades that built my confidence instead of borrowing it, they all share the same spine. I didn't try to be a hero at the start. I let the market hire me. Then I scaled like a professional. That's the art we're going to practice together, the art of scaling in the way Jesse Livermore actually did it, not with bravado, but with a quiet, repeatable compounding machine hidden inside a single trade. Most people think scaling is just buy more when you like it. Livermore's answer was stricter, colder, and far more profitable, add only from profits and only on fresh proof. In other words, conviction trails evidence, size trails progress. That single idea turned my account from a diary of opinions into a ledger of behaviors. Here's the honest problem. A beautiful setup seduces us because it feels like relief from uncertainty. We want to be all in on that relief. We front-load size, and the first inevitable wiggle squeezes us into bad decisions, tighten stops. Narrative changes, early exits that amputate winners and feed losers. Livermore solved this by splitting a campaign into units with jobs. Unit number 1, the scout isn't there to make you rich. It's there to test the tape, comprise, reclaim, and hold a meaningful level. Will the first pullback find sponsorship at the right location? Will the next push show participation from leaders in the group? If the answer is yes, the market funds unit number 2, the first add out of the scouts and realized gain. If there's a second, independent proof range shift, leadership broadening, breadth expanding, unit number 3 unlocks. Every ad is paid. Every ad is earned. You're not averaging down into trouble. You're averaging up into truth. Why does this work? Because large, persistent moves have a tell. They give back little relative to what they take. Scaling into that behavior means you put your largest capital where the evidence is greatest, not where your hope is loudest. It also makes the backside of the trade saner. When I build with paid units, I can trail beneath structure that defines the thesis, not beneath fear. If price surrenders the entire paid move, I reduce without speeches. The risk feels lighter because it's financed by success, not subsidized by pride. Livermore's invisible compounding lives in the distance between units. Most traders think in entries and exits. Livermore thought in graduations. Each graduation demanded the same two questions: did progress pay for size? And did new proof appear? If not, he sat still. If yes, he scaled. And he did it without changing personality mid-trade. That discipline creates an asymmetry. Your losers stay small and early because disproof shows up quickly. Your winners grow late and large because proof keeps arriving. Over a month, this isn't just risk control, it's compounding without leaving the position. In this film, I'll take you through the full arc. First, the inner conflict you'll feel when your hand wants to add for comfort instead of proof. Then the psychological traps, manufactured confirmation, identity rescue, time distortion that turns scaling into sabotage. We'll step into Livermore's lens to see how he read sponsorship forming and why he demanded sequence before size. I'll walk you through a real campaign where the ads were paid, the trail lived under structure, and the exit happened at disproof for time, not at the nearest convenient tick. We'll touch the emotional low point every campaign owes you, then lock in the breakthrough rule proof before conviction, and translate it into modern installations, tickets that refuse unpaid ads, timers that end hostage trades, and basket controls that prevent one wave from taxing 5 rhyming tickers. Finally, I'll hand you a step-by-step card you can run on your worst day without improvisation. And we'll close with a posture you can actually carry into live heat. Scaling in is not about getting bigger. It's about getting truer as you get bigger. If you've ever wondered why your best ideas felt fragile while your worst ideas somehow grew, the answer is that size followed feeling, not proof. Livermore flipped that arrow. From now on, we will too. When you add to a position right now, is it usually because you feel you're right or because the last unit's profit and fresh proof earn the next ad? Tell me in one sentence. I'll tailor the next section to your answer. Continuing from the idea that scaling must be paid and proved. The first resistance I meet isn't on the chart, it's inside my chest. The moment unit number 1 starts working, two versions of me wake up. One wants to add for relief to turn a green flicker into security, to smother uncertainty with size. The other wants to freeze for perfection, to wait until the tape has spelled out the entire story. In capital letters, both impulses feel protective. Both can quietly destroy the compounding I'm trying to build. Livermore forced those impulses to earn jobs instead of the steering wheel. The be bold voice gets the right to add only when the prior unit's game pays the ticket, and the be careful voice gets the right to veto until fresh proof appears in sequence. Here's how the paradox plays out in real time. I buy the scout on a reclaim and hold of a meaningful level. The first pullback lands near the shelf almost right, but not quite, and a part of me wants to anticipate sponsorship. That's adding for comfort. Another part of me insists we must see breadth surge, leadership broaden, and a perfect flag before touching size by then. The risk-reward is shrunk, and I'm paying retail for what I recognized wholesale. Livermore's answer is to bind timing to behavior. There is no unique number 2 without location-correct sponsorship, and there is no unique number 3 without independent proof range shift, leadership echo, sector breadth uptick. My impulse can ask. The tape must higher. The next layer of conflict is identity versus method. To clean scratches in a row, and I feel the urge to get back in size. Not because the sequence is complete, but because I want my tone restored. This is where scaling flips from compounding to rescue. Livermore's guardrails block the detour. Ads from profits only. No averaging down. No reputation ads. I don't purchase calm with size. I purchase size with progress. Time distorts me next. A good campaign has a quiet middle bars that look like nothing, where winners are built. My nerves translate that silence into urgency. Do something. Without a time stop. I babysit maybes and miss the moment the chain prints elsewhere. Pairing price at disproof with the timer turns waiting from mood into procedure. Either the idea behaves on time, or it's stale and I free attention for the next sponsor. Correlation adds a quieter sabotage. For names that rhyme feel like diversification. In reality, they're one bet in a trench coat. When the wave hits, all for Neil. Scaling then mutates from precision to leverage. Counting exposure by character theme, factor, beta, and capping total open risk keeps a paid pyramid from becoming a hidden tower. If the index shoves or coupling tightens, I cut the basket as one decision, even if my favorite chart still sings. Finally, there's the give back fear. As soon as the position breathes +1R, my protect voice wants to trail under noise. That strangles the campaign into mediocrity and guarantees I'll rarely reach unit number 3. Livermore's posture is colder. Scale some of the first measured extension to bank campaign profit. Then trail beneath structure that defines the thesis, not beneath fear. If the entire paid move is surrendered, reduce without speeches. Otherwise, let the horse run. When these rules are on the page before the bell, my two voices stop negotiating and start performing. The bold side waits to be funded. The cautious side waits to be convinced. Neither is allowed to improvise. That is the real art of scaling, to let evidence organize emotion so the largest capital lives, where the most truth has already appeared. In your own trading, which side hijacks you more during scaling, adding for comfort before sponsorship, or waiting for perfection until the edge is gone? Tell me in one line and I'll target that exact leak in the next section. Staying with the tension, we just mapped comfort versus perfection. The core problem with scaling isn't technical at all. It's linguistic. Under pressure, I start renaming things so I can add when I want, not when I'm hired. A whisper above resistance becomes reclaim. A bounce to 8 tiers below the shelf becomes healthy sponsorship. One strong candle and a laggard becomes leadership. None of those edits change the tape. They only change my permission. That is how a clean, paid pyramid quietly mutates into a stack built on relief. The first trap is manufactured confirmation. The method requires a sequence in order reclaim and hold gives sponsored pullback at location. Gives participation from leaders. When I want size, I promote a single tick to proof. I front-run sponsorship because the pullback looks constructive. Or I accept a soloist because my name is the only one moving. The fix must be written before the bell. The verbs are non-negotiable. If the reclaim does not hold, there is no unit number 1 hold to test. If the pullback does not find sponsorship where it should on, just above the reclaimed level, or at the last higher low, there is no unit number 2. If leaders do not echo, there is no unit number 3. Sequence is either present or it isn't. There is no almost add. The second trap is identity rescue. After the scratches, I feel compelled to get back in size, not because the chain is complete, but because my tone needs restoration. That is when unpaid ads sneak in tiny anticipations justified as keeping it honest. Livermore's antidote is ruthless. Ads from profits only. If the prior unit's unrealized does not pay the next unit's risk, size is a confession, not a policy. This rule makes averaging down logically impossible. If conviction must trail proof, pressing into disproof is contradiction. Third is time distortion. A correct campaign includes a quiet middle where nothing exciting happens. My nervous system equates silence with failure and wants action. Without a time stop, I babysit maybes until they become hostage trades and miss the sequence forming elsewhere. Pairing the price stop at disproof with the timer converts waiting from mood into procedure. Either behavior prints inside the window, or attention returns to cash inventory for the next invitation. Fourth is narrative stops. I inch the exit to where it hurts less rather than where the idea dies. The thesis dies at lost structure, last higher low broken. Failed reclaims new support, refusing its job, or time expiry. Anywhere else is anesthesia, and anesthesia guarantees I won't hold size when proof finally arrives. Fifth is correlation blindness. For tickers rhyme, and I call it diversification. In reality, it's one factor in a trench coat. When the wave hits, they kneel together and my careful scaling becomes hidden leverage. Counting exposure by character theme, beta, sector, and capping total open factor risk prevents a paid pyramid from turning into a tower I never meant to build. When coupling tightens or the index shoves, I trim the basket as one decision. Even if my favorite chart still looks immaculate. Sixth is overtype profit protection. As soon as the position breathes +1R, I trail under noise to lock it in, choking the campaign to mediocrity, then ensuring I rarely qualify for unit number 3. The structural fix, scale some at the first measured extension to bank campaign profit, then re-anchor the stop beneath structure that defines the thesis, not beneath fear. If the entire paid move is surrendered, reduce without speeches. Otherwise, let the horse run. Seventh is P and L anchoring and recency bias. A green morning invites me to relax the bar for proof. A red morning invites me to manufacture it. Process scoring beside P and L disarms both. Sequences honored, time stops obeyed, ads paid. Basket managed. Green luck can't launder sloppiness. Clean red still counts as progress. All of these traps share one engine, the need for relief impersonating truth. The cure is the same spine where building evidence organizes emotion. That means the chart must behave at location, on time, and with acquire, before size grows. Size must be paid. Exits must be contracts. With that posture in place, we can finally borrow Livermore's eyes without nostalgia and ask, very concretely, what he looked for before he let a position compound. Carrying those traps into Livermore's lens. The biggest upgrade I made was redefining what strength means before I'm allowed to scale. He didn't anoint a candle. He audited a sequence at location, on schedule, with acquire. In his language, I hear for anchors that turn scaling into invisible compounding, line of least resistance, sponsorship, contracts with reality, and pyramids paid by progress. I start where he started, the line of least resistance. He wanted evidence that price wanted to travel a certain way before he offered it more of his capital. That evidence wasn't a spike. It was a reclaim and hold at a point of importance, a weekly pivot, a prior failure high, the top of a base that is memory. The hold is crucial. A whisper above resistance is flirting. Holding converts a ceiling into a floor. If I don't see that conversion, unit number 1 remains a probe, not a foundation. Next comes sponsorship, but only at the right location. He didn't bless any bounce. He looked for the first pullback to breathe where logic says buyers should report for duty. On or just above the reclaimed level, or at the last higher low that defines structure. If sponsorship appears to 8 tiers deeper, that isn't bravery, it's luck. And luck cannot fund a pyramid. Here, location does more than confirm the idea. It teaches me where my price stop belongs, because if that sponsored area fails, the story ends. That's a contract, not a mood. Then he demanded participation acquire. One name can impersonate vigor for a while. A campaign requires accomplices. He wanted leaders in the group to echo the push, sector breadth to lean with him, and the broader tape to stop contradicting. That's the difference between a cameo and an advance. Without the choir, I may be right, but I'm unlikely to be paid enough to justify size. With those 3 links in order, he practiced pyramids paid by progress. This is where his compounding turns invisible. Unit number 1 was a test, small, bracketed, often quickly wrong, cheaply wrong. Unit number 2 existed only if 2 things were true at once. The prior units unrealized paid the new risk, and fresh proof appeared range shift, clean retest stand go at the shelf, or leadership broadening. Unit number 3 required an independent proof, not a louder version of the same bar. This policy does to elegant things. It makes averaging down logically impossible, and it pushes the largest size to the latest, truest part of the move. That's the quiet compounding modern traders keep trying to replicate with more trades. Instead of more qualification inside one trade, he paired entries and adds with contracts with reality. The price stop lived where the idea died beneath the reclaimed turn support or the last higher low. That narrates the thesis. The time stop lived where the promise expires, a momentum window chosen before the order went live. If the window closed without behavior, he flattened. Not because of fear, but because attention is capital. Hostage trades don't just lose money. They steal the operator from the next sponsored invitation. Livermore respected waves more than raindrops. He diversified by character theme, beta. Factors, so 5 rhyming tickers couldn't pretend to be 5 independent ideas. When coupling tightened or the index shoved, he reduced the basket as a single decision even if his favorite chart still looked sanely. That's how a correct read avoids getting framed for a macro crime and keeps capital available to press when the water calms. Finally, he honored cash as inventory. Flat wasn't absence. It was optionality that bought the next early seat. If the chain stalled at time, he ended the story and kept the one asset that compounds all others' attention. When the chain reprinted one tier higher, he re-engaged without pride because his rule cares about behavior, not biography. Mapping this lens onto my scaling problem turns the abstract into verbs: reclaim and hold the level. Sponsor at location, participate as a group. Pyramid only when paid, and end all debates at price or time. With that, I don't need a bigger stomach. I need a cleaner sequence. And that's exactly what I'll carry into the live campaign next. One trade where the ads were earned. The trail lived under structure, and the quiet middle did the heavy lifting while I stopped trying to feel safe and started letting the tape pay for my courage. Carrying Livermore's lens into a live session, I built a campaign and a name I'll call Mariner Grid Liquid, institutionally owned, and sitting beneath a weekly pivot that had rejected price twice in the last month. Before I let the chart flatter me, I tagged the ocean, breadth modest. Realized ATR above its 20-day, leadership narrowing, factor coupling medium high. That set the regime to neutral leaning ruthless. Permissions tightened automatically in my playbook, attempts capped at 4, base risk trimmed. Confirmation bar raised 1 notch. None of that predicts a win. It simply keeps me from letting one pretty candle overrule an ugly sea. I drew the level that mattered. Last Thursday's failure high. Plus, a volatility cushion so a whisper above the line couldn't impersonate proof. Below it, I marked the structure pivot the last higher low on the 30-minute, so I know exactly where the idea dies. For location, I circled the shelf just above the reclaim. Sponsorship needed to appear there or at that higher low. Anything deeper would demote strength to luck. For participation, I pinned the peers in the sector ETF so acquire not my bias could decide when the push was real. The open did what opens love to do. It tried to recruit my impatience. Mariner flicked through the level and stalled. Nothing. 10 minutes later, another probe. A little excess, a pullback. Still nothing. On the third approach, we reclaimed and held for a full 5-minute bar, and then another. Bids stepped in at the line rather than just below it. That satisfied the first verb in the chain, so I sent the scout small bracketed on a timer set to 75 minutes. The scout's job wasn't income. It was a paid question. Will you keep your promise? The first pullback landed where the story said it should on the shelf just above the reclaim. Spreads stayed tight. Time and Q hinted real interest, not a one-print miracle. On the next push, I watched the chorus tile. One peer marched in lockstep, the other hesitated. The ETF blinked green. I waited 2 more minutes. When the second peer finally joined and volume swelled across the group. Unit number 2 unlocked, funded by the scout's unrealized gain, not by my appetite. Progress literally paid for aggression. Midday delivered the silence that breaks most pyramids. The timer kept me honest. My old habit would narrate. They're absorbing. It's coiling. The system said, it's stalling until it isn't. Read the clock. At minute 62, we printed a higher low at the shelf. Then a range shift cleared the morning high. That was the independent proof I require for unit number 3. I added. Took a partial into the first measured extension to bank campaign profit, and re-anchored the stop under the intraday structure that now defined the thesis. I wrote one line to handcuff future me. If the entire paid move is surrendered, reduce without speeches. An hour later, the index shoved and factor coupling tightened across the complex. My blotter is grouped by character theme, beta, so 5 rhyming tickers couldn't pretend to be 5 ideas. Even though Mariner still looked composed, I trimmed the basket as one decision lead and cousins together because waves, not raindrops, sink boats. That trim bought me the right to let Mariner keep talking. It dipped, kissed the trail, and held. Into the close, structure remained intact. Participation didn't vanish. Coupling eased, and my process score stayed green. I carried a small runner overnight with a sentence taped to the chart. By morning, the shelf must still act like a floor. Pre-market news poked the name lower. The open ticked my stop by pennies, and then the tape launched. Annoying, yes but correct. 10 minutes later, the sequence reprinted 1 tier higher, clean reclaim and hold. Then a precise sponsored pullback. Then leaders echoed. Pride would call that chasing. Procedure called it re-engage on behavior. I ran the choreography scout timer. Paid out on fresh proof, and this time the stair-step advance paid for patience across 2 sessions. When the push finally surrendered the entire paid move, I reduced without a speech and let the remainder trail until the thesis, not my nerves, broke. Reviewing the journal mattered more than the dollars. I didn't know anything special. I refused to rename things to buy comfort. Reclaim and hold was a behavior at a point that mattered. Sponsorship was location-correct buying. Participation was acquire, not a chat room. Ads were paid. Exits lived at disproof for time. The basket respected the wave. That is Livermore's invisible compounding. Largest size living in the truest part of the move. Because evidence, not ego, earned it. In that Mariner campaign, where would you struggle most waiting for location-correct sponsorship? Enforcing the time stop during silence, or taking the re-entry after a correct stop-out? Tell me your pick so I can tighten that hinge as we move into the emotional low point next. Emotional low point or turning point carrying the Mariner campaign forward. The tape did what every good tape eventually does, it stopped flattering me. After 2 sessions of methodical stares, the range narrowed and the rhythm that had funded my ads went thin. I could feel the residue of recent success loosening the bolts I had tightened before the first entry. The pre-open dashboard was honest breath softer. Realized ATR still elevated, leadership narrowing, coupling inching up, but familiarity tempted me to grandfather yesterday's discipline into today's work. That was the first wobble, not a broken rule, a promoted mood dot at the open. Mariner printed a neat reclaim 1 tier higher. By the book, that deserved a scout, bracketed stop at disproof, timer set. The pullback, however, landed a shade deeper than the shelf I had circled. My mind reached for the old, expensive vocabulary, healthy, shook out the weak hands, phrases that exist mostly to buy permission. The chorus tile stayed thin. Participation refused to sing. The timer did its job, and the position closed on schedule small. Forgettable, correct. What mattered wasn't the scratch. It was the sound of a sentence forming under my breath. Give it a little room. On the next attempt, the reclaim was cleaner, and the first pullback looked almost right. Almost is where compounding goes to die. I felt the urge to front-run sponsorship by adding a little early so it matters. That is how scaling flips from policy to identity rescue. I stared at the stop and felt the tug to inch it to a friendlier number. The chart hadn't changed. Only my story had. I closed the chart, stood up, and took the 10-minute reset I promised myself after the last time. Almost cost me a week. Shoes on. Water, hallway, breath, back at the desk. I ran the 2-column audit that keeps me honest. What the tape proved, reclaim held briefly. Sponsorship at location did not appear. Leadership hesitant. Sector breadth thin. Coupling heavier than yesterday. What I assumed without proof. The dip was a shakeout. Buyers were about to show. The group would catch up. Nothing in the left column hired an ad. Everything in the right column tried to buy relief. Enforcement not in sight turned the day. I re-labeled the regime ruthless for the next 90 minutes, which automatically raised the confirmation bar and cut my attempt budget. I rearmed the paid ad gate so size could not slip in on anticipation. I locked the time stop automation so no position could apply for hostage status. I tightened the basket alert so a small shove from the index would force a theme-wide trim, even if Mariner still looked composed. And I typed the dangerous sentence, give it a little room, in red at the top of the screen, as a reminder that extra room usually means the idea doesn't deserve me. The afternoon tested the repairs. Mariner reclaimed again, and this time, the pullback kissed the shelf with the precision that had been missing all morning. I waited. 2 bars later, sponsorship did appear at the correct location, and the chorus thickened peer 1 in step, peer to joining, the ETF leaning with us. Only then did unit number to unlock, paid by the scouts, and realized. I took a partial into the first measured extension to bank the campaign's breath, and re-anchored the stop beneath the structure that defined the thesis. Not beneath the nearest comforting tick dot into the last hour. The index nudged lower, and coupling tightened again. I trimmed the basket as one decision lead and cousins together so a wave couldn't tax 5 rhyming tickers at once. Mariner dipped, kissed the trail, and held. The P and L was modest, but the process score was loud. Time stops honored, unpaid ads refused. Basket respected, narrative contained. The emotional low point turned not on a spectacular win, but on the reassertion of jurisdiction, the system's right to overrule my need for relief. That is the turning I have to earn in every campaign. The moment I stop trying to feel safe and return to being hired. Scaling only compounds when the quiet middle is allowed to stay quiet, and when they contract with price and time ends arguments before they metastasize into improvisation. From this footing, the rule that makes compounding inevitable can finally be stated in one line and wired into everything that follows. Picking up from the moment discipline reasserted jurisdiction in Section 6, the rule that makes scaling compound rather than merely enlarge is simple to say, and demanding to live, proof before conviction, and conviction only to the degree that proof expands. Livermore expressed it through pyramids that were funded, spaced, and defended by behavior, not by optimism. The first consequence is structural, Every campaign is built from units with jobs, not one lump of exposure dragged from entry to exit. Unit number 1, the scout purchases information at the instant the tape first keeps a promise reclaim and hold at a point of importance. Its size is deliberately modest so the cost of being early is survivable, and the benefit of being right is permission to remain attentive. The second consequence is the unlock logic for unit number 2. It exists only when two facts are simultaneously true. The scouts unrealized pays the incremental risk, and fresh proof appears on schedule, typically a sponsored pullback at the correct location, or a clean retest and go off the reclaimed level. If either condition is missing, the ad is not denied because I'm timid. It is denied because the market hasn't earned the right to my larger capital. That denial is how averaging down becomes logically impossible. When conviction must trail proof, pressing into disproof contradicts the rule itself. Unit number 3 demands an independent proof. Livermore wouldn't accept a louder version of the same bar. He wanted a range shift above the morning high, leadership broadening across the group, or sector breadth expanding in step. This avoids pyramids built on echoes and ensures the largest size lives in the truest part of the move. He also spaced units with intent, rather than stacking at arbitrary price intervals. He used behavioral distances, for example, adding after a structural high or low forms and the next push reclaims initiative, or after a consolidation holds atop the prior shelf. Spacing by structure keeps the campaign from becoming top-heavy in noise and concentrates risk. Where the thesis has actually matured, stops where contracts with reality. The price stops at exactly where the story broke under the reclaimed turn support, beneath the last high or low, or below the pivot the thesis narrates. The time stop recognizes that momentum owes character inside a declared window. If it withholds, the idea is stale even if price hasn't violated the line. These contracts do more than cap loss. They protect attention, which is the fuel required to recognize the next proof when it appears. Risk wasn't counted by ticker symbols. It was counted by character. 5 rhyming names are one bet in disguise. Livermore's equivalent was to diversify by theme, beta, and to manage basket exposure. As a single decision, when waves hit, I can be right on a chart and wrong on the sea. Cutting the basket together honors the fact that waves, not raindrops, sink boats. That in turn preserves the ability to continue scaling the surviving campaign, rather than selling winners to finance losers. The final element is what makes the whole rule livable: re-entry dignity. A correct stop is a success, not a stain. If the sequence reprints one tier higher reclaim and hold, sponsorship at location, participation, the campaign is new. The biography is irrelevant. The same choreography applies: scout, timer, paid ads, contracts, and the account benefits from a clean narrative loop rather than a grudging, late chase, put together. The lesson operates like a metronome. Conditions gate ambition gives scout on first kept promise, gives ad only when paid, and on fresh proof gives space ads by structure, gives and all debates at price or time gives. Manage exposure by basket. The result isn't louder courage. It's quieter compounding. Winners grow because truth grows. Losers shrink because truth fails early. From this spine, turning the lesson into modern desk mechanics becomes straightforward without changing its character. How it applies to modern traders. Building directly on the metronome from section 7. I translate each line of proof before conviction into defaults my desk enforces. Even when I'm tired, the goal isn't to be brave. It's to make the right action cheaper than the wrong one. Before the bell, I open a small regime panel that converts the ocean into permissions. Index breadth versus its 20-day. Realize ATR versus its 20-day. Leadership persistence across my liquid universe. And a quick factor coupling score. One click tags the day forgiving, neutral/ruthless, and pushes that tag into broker presets. Attempts 5 quarters, 3. Base risk 1.0, art 0.75, art 0.5 r. And confirmation bar +0, +1/2. If I hesitate, I default to ruthless so no single pretty chart can overrule an ugly C. That single adjective carries the lesson that conditions gate ambition. Orders are built to make test gives pay gives protect unavoidable. Every first entry is a bracketed scout OCO with 3 non-negotiables. 1. The stop sits at disproof the exact place the story breaks, not the number that soothes me. 2. A timer runs the time stop, so the idea must show character on schedule or it exits without debate. 3. The profit leg is sized to finance unit number 2 if fresh proof appears. This structure buys the seat cheaply and prevents hostage trades from taxing attention, while I wait for the real invitation elsewhere. Scaling only unlocks when progress funds it. The platform literally blocks unit number 2 unless the conditions are true together. The scout's unrealized pays the additional risk and fresh proof appears range shift, or a clean retest and go at the shelf. Unit number 3 requires an independent proof such as leadership broadening or sector breadth expansion. If proof pauses, scaling pauses. This one mechanic turns be bold into policy and makes averaging down logically impossible. Because conviction is not allowed to outrun evidence. To avoid imagining confirmation, I keep participation visible. Next to price lives a small chorus tile, percent of group above their reclaim. Leaders volume share versus laggards and a rolling sector breadth line. Thin tile, thin conviction. When the tile thickens, I know I'm in a campaign, not a cameo, and I don't need chatter to be brave. Exposure is counted by character, not tickers. My blotter groups positions by theme, beta, factor, caps total open factor risk is less than or equal to 3R, and fires an alert to trim the basket when coupling tightens or the index shoves. I reduce as one decision even if my favorite chart still behaves because waves, not raindrops. Sink boats. That keeps a correct read from getting framed for a macro crime and preserves the ability to press. When water calms, I also split the day into roles to keep drift out. Analyze pre-open, tag regime, right setup cards entry behavior, disprove time window. Add criteria in text, not memory. Operator live, execute only what's on the card. Auditor post close, 2 columns what the tape proved versus what I assumed without proof and a process score beside P and L sequences honored. Time stops obeyed, pay dead rule respected. Basket managed. Parameters get reviewed only after 30 fully qualified trades in similar conditions. Variance alone isn't permission to tweak. Finally, I hardwire re-entry dignity. A correct stop is success, not stigma. If the chain reprints one tier higher, the system surfaces a fresh card, same scout, same timer. Same pay dad logic, so pride can't turn a clean opportunity into a late chase. In practice, that single habit has recovered more big legs than any new indicator I've ever trialed. This is the same sentence from Section 7 expressed through buttons. Reclaim and hold gives sponsored pullback, gives participation, gives scout, gives paid ads, gives exits at price and time, gives basket control. The crowd can fake a candle. It cannot fake a chain on schedule. My tools keep me honest long enough for that difference to compound. Step-by-step practical implementation being directly on the installs from Section 8. I run a single, repeatable loop that makes scaling feel like procedure rather than courage. I write it as a checklist I can obey on a bad day without creativity. Pre-open, tag and allocate. I open the regime panel and tag the ocean forgiving, neutral/ruthless using breadth versus 20-day. Realize ATR versus 20-day, leadership persistence and factor coupling. That one adjective pushes presets to the broker. Attempts 5 quarters, 3. Base risk opening parenthesis 1.0 r/0.5 are closing parenthesis. Confirmation bar +0, +1/2. If I hesitate on the tag, I default to ruthless so conditions gate ambition. I then size my unit template. Unit number 1 scout equals 1x. Unit number 2 equals 1x. Unit number 3 equals 1 to 1. 5x depending on regime. Largest size is always latest and truest. Build watch list by behavior. To columns. Level clean reclaim, pivot, and leadership are S leaders. If a name appears in both, it's starred. I pinned the peers and the sector ETF for each star so participation has visible references. Right setup cards, no memory ads. For blanks must be filled before any order. Entry behavior, reclaim and hold of specific. Level, disproof. Exact price where the idea dies beneath reclaimed. Level plus cushion or below last higher. Low. Time window. Minutes. Bars for momentum to show. Character. Add criteria. Fresh proof only. Range shift. Clean retest and go at shelf. Leadership echo. If any blank can't be filled, the name goes to observation. Opening protocol test. I let the reclaim happen and hold. First order is a bracketed scout OCO. Stop at disproof. Profit leg size to finance unit number 2. Timer set to the cards window. The scout's job is information, not income. I narrate the chain aloud. Hold. Sponsored pullback. Participation to keep language from quietly downgrading the verbs. Scaling protocol pay. Unit number 2 unlocks only if 2 conditions are simultaneously true. A. The scout's unrealized pays the incremental risk. B. Fresh proof appears range shift or retest and go with visible sponsorship. Unit number 3 requires an independent proof leadership broadens, sector breadth expands. Or second range shift, if proof pauses, scaling pauses. No reputation ads. No make back ads. This prevents averaging down by logic, not willpower. Risk and trail, protect. I trail beneath structure that defines the thesis, not beneath fear. I take a partial at the first measured extension to bank campaign profit. Then re-anchor stops under the new structure. If the position gives back the entire paid move, I reduce without speeches. I map exposure by character theme, beta, sector, and cap. Total factor risk is less than or equal to 3R. When the index shoves or coupling tightens, I trim the basket as one decision even if my prettiest chart still behaves, because waves, not raindrops, sink boats. Silence handling and hostage trades. The timer ends arguments. If the window closes without behavior, the position exits automatically. If for scans in a row produce no qualified sequences, I schedule a watch-only block to recharge attention. Cash is inventory for the next sponsor, not a verdict on identity. Re-entry dignity, same rules. New card. If I'm stopped correctly and the chain reprints one tier higher, I run a fresh card. Same scout, same timer, same pay gate. I'm not chasing price. I'm re-engaging behavior. Last hour, hold or flatten by contract. If a runner survives, I will hold overnight only if one structure still defines the thesis and a coupling is benign. I write one sentence on the chart. What must remain true by morning? If the sentence needs adjectives, I flatten. Post-close audit, keep the operator solvent. To columns, what the tape proved versus what I assumed without proof. I score process 0 to 5 beside P and L sequence honored. Time stop obeyed, ads paid, basket respected. Parameters are reviewed only after 30 fully qualified trades in a similar regime. Variance alone is not permission to tweak. Any rule break or -2 our day triggers, half size for 10 clean executions. Screens off, walk, water. Journal. This loop doesn't predict which name will compound. It preserves me through the quiet middle, so I'm present when the tape funds my size. The largest capital ends up where the most truth exists, and that's Livermore's invisible compounding in practice. Cinematic conclusion plus emotional sign-off, carrying the step-by-step loop from section 9 into the final minutes of the session. I notice the same temptations arrive on schedule. A one-tick high dressed up as destiny. A shallow dip begging to be renamed sponsorship. A chat window offering borrowed conviction. None of that alters the choreography that has held this campaign together. Reclaim and hold. Gives sponsored pullback at location, gives participation across leaders, gives scout, gives paid ads, gives exits at price, and time gives basket control. My job isn't to be early or perfect. It's to be on time, to let evidence keep time, then to let size trail truth. The largest capital now sits where the most proof has already appeared, and the smallest capital sits where I'm most likely to be wrong quickly. That's not personality. That's design. This is where Livermore's invisible compounding becomes visible in the ledger, even if it remains quiet on the screen. Unit number 1 bought a seat the moment the market kept its first promise. Units number 2 and number 3 were funded by progress, not by appetite. Each ad waited for a new reason to exist, first a location-correct breath, then an independent shift or a broadening choir. So the pyramid grew only in the truest part of the move. When momentum paused, the timer ended the conversation without needing my courage. When structure cracked, the price stop escorted me out at the exact place the story died. When the index shoved and coupling tightened, the basket reduced as one decision so a wave couldn't tax 5 rhyming tickers at once. I didn't have to invent discipline at the close because the day began with contracts that outlived my moods. The quieter victory isn't P and L. It's the operator I get to bring back tomorrow. Attention never spent an afternoon babysitting maybes. Pride never hired an unpaid ad. Relief never moved to stop to a friendlier number. The reentry I once called chasing is simply a fresh card when the chain reprints one tier higher. Even the losses now behave differently. They are small, early, and instructive. Because disproof arrives quickly when you insist on location and time. The winners behave differently as well. They feel boring for long stretches, because the drama has been outsourced to procedure. That boredom is the sound of compounding doing its work. As screens darken, I read a short checklist the way a captain reads gauges before shutting the engines. Did the ocean tag gate ambition, or did I promote a mood to forecast? Did I require a hold and sponsorship at location, or did I let distance rewrite the story? Did I verify participation with a choir, or accept a soloist because it sang my favorite tune? Did I add only when paid and only on fresh proof, or did I rent size from hope? Did exits live where the idea dies, or when the window closes, or at the nearest comfortable tick? Did I trim the basket on the wave, or wait for my prettiest chart to ask nicely? Honest answers here matter more than today's number, because they determine whether I'll still be present for the next sponsored invitation. I copy one sentence onto tomorrow's card while it's still true. Proof before conviction, and conviction only to the degree that proof expands. It isn't a motto, it's a metronome. It keeps me from letting almost impersonate earned, from letting reactivity impersonate risk management, and from letting pride impersonate patience. It reminds me that I don't trade symbols or stories. I trade behavior at location, on schedule, with a choir. When that behavior appears, the market will fund my courage. When it withholds, I leave with to balance a solvent capital and attention. If I'm rich in both at the close, I'm professionally wealthy because I can afford to wait again. Somewhere, a new campaign is already forming in silence. It will reclaim and hold. It will breathe at the shelf. It will gather a choir. And it will pay anyone who stayed available through the quiet middle. I intend to be there not because I guess better, but because today I practice the only thing that makes tomorrow possible. I let evidence organize emotion, and I let size follow truth.